Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Beyond Binary with the very amazing Patrick Sullivan. And welcome to the Beyond Binary podcast, where we explore the future of responsible technology, one conversation at a time. And today we have truly insightful guest joining us, someone who sits at the crucial intersection of AI governance, cybersecurity, and global standards. Patrick Sullivan is a leading authority in AI governance and compliance with deep expertise in ISO, IEC 42001, AI risk management, AI ethics, and algorithmic auditing. He's currently the Vice President of Strategy and Innovation at Aline, where he helps organizations navigate the complex landscape of AI assurance and security frameworks. And Patrick is also contributing member of the International Association of Algorithmic Auditors and plays a key role in shaping the future of AI standards through his active contributions to INCITS and ISO SC 442 and the International Committee guiding AI standardization. And so, whether you're building AI systems or responsible for keeping them safe, ethical, and compliant, Patrick's perspective will expand your understanding of how ISO standards are transforming the way we govern AI. So, grab your coffee and get comfortable with one and only Patrick Sullivan. Thank you, Patrick, for being here. It's such an honor to have you.
Rupa, the honor is all mine, honestly. As you went through some of the things I participate in the introduction, one of the groups that you left out is the International Association of AI Ethicists, which I joined because of you. So thank you so much for what you've done to help lead how I think about AI ethics and what's really, really important, not just for me, but for our entire community.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Patrick. You have always been a source of inspiration and motivation for me. And
Same, same.
amazing. So, Patrick, tell us, like, for a company just starting on AI governance, where should they begin? ISO certification, internal risk frameworks, or legal compliance?
And Rupert, this is a question that requires just a little bit of an explanation because every organization is so different. You mentioned legal compliance. That will always be an external pressure for entities, regardless of where they sit in the world. Internal risk, also always a pressure. But what I find is that for many organizations, depending on the level of maturity, approaching each of those obligations in a fractured, bifurcated way leads to lots and lots of confusion. Quite frankly, we see teams sinking time and money into initiatives that don't consider the organization holistically and therefore really, really limited in their utility. So it's for that reason, and those of you that have heard me talk about ISO management systems in the past, this will be a similar conversation. But it's for that reason that I do believe that ISO management systems, whether they're focused on AI, life cycle, information security, information privacy, whatever the case may be, I do believe the right place for most organizations to start will be with evaluation of and implementation of an ISO management system. Whether that leads to ultimate certification or not really will be the decision of the entity and the external pressures they have as it relates to their markets and their regulation. Nonetheless, the ISO management system itself offers a way for organizations to step back out of the fray, out of the chaos of their daily operations, and think in context holistically about where their highest areas of priority are and how they can begin affecting a change over those areas. So, Rupa, short answer for me, for anyone listening, for anyone that has ears to hear, consider implementing an ISO management system as it relates to AI. The standard for ISO's AI management system is ISO 42001. If you haven't investigated it, please start today. It will be a wise investment.
Right, amazing, Patrick. And also, because waiting for external standards to catch up can also leave companies being reactive. And so it's important that to build their own ethical scaffoldings, which will allow them to foresee risk and protect people and amplify the social good for AI systems that they're, creating. And technically also it makes sense because laws takes time and standards lag behind.
Always.
And but
Always.
but an internal framework, so that's agile and that's adaptable, and so that's why you're taking responsibility for the systems you're creating.
And that is the goal, Rupa, for organizations to recognize what it is they're doing and take responsibility and accountability to act in a responsible way. That is the ultimate goal of ISO 42001.
Amazing. So Patrick, if you had to choose between adopting ISO and IEC 42001 or following the NIST AI RMF for a healthcare startup, which would
Hmm.
you pick and why?
Oh, goodness, another great question, Rupa. And again, I'll have to preface this with it depends on the context. Is this healthcare company a covered entity, or are they simply a business associate providing some service to that covered entity? What is the depth and breadth to which they're actually maintaining? I think the standard is creating, receiving, maintaining, or transmitting EPHI. And so depending on where an organization sits in that context, in that regard, I think the real question is, what do I really want to create? The NIST AI risk management framework is an incredible tool set. And while readers will see in the various domains that are part of the AI RMF a governance domain, it's important to understand that the NIST AI RMF is not a governance framework. It's a risk management framework. Risk management is only a part. It's a subset of AI governance as we think about the entire AI lifecycle. And so if that healthcare entity is considered or is considering first and foremost risk, the AIRMF can be a tool that allows them to quickly and easily understand what their risks are. If, however, the focus is building a responsible governance and management system so that the AI through the life cycle in this organization can continue to grow, adapt, and evolve as it needs to respond to internal and external pressures, then starting with the ISO 42001 as a management system, as a governance framework, for me is the thing to do. And what we'll see is that there is so much cross-pollination between ISO and NIST. In fact, even the groups that I participate in as an SME are heavily loaded with NIST representation. We'll see there are even clean mappings that have been created between the AIRMF and ISO 42001 so that entities don't necessarily have to be selective. It's almost a false dichotomy to say this or this. Organizations, again, depending on their maturity and their goals, what it is they really want to create, can implement both in a way that becomes very, very supportive of continued growth and maturation.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you for the insight,
Oh,
Patrick.
of course.
Very valuable. And so, and Patrick, so which frameworks are more globally accepted, which is like NIST, ISO, EU AI Act, or IEEE, and what drives broader adoption?
Goodness. With each of those frameworks, I don't necessarily think of them, I don't think of acceptance as being a geographical thing. And by that I mean for the longest time in the US domestically, we just had the idea that NIST frameworks were only used here, that outside of the US, everything was ISO. What I found is that that's just not true. That we find organizations globally using NIST frameworks, whether they're the AI risk management framework, we talk about SP 800-53, kind of the controls to employ to ensure that information is secured. We see those standards being used everywhere because the world recognizes the value of the standards and frameworks themselves. So, as opposed to a global distribution, what I really see is the decision makers and the way that people are looking at what needs to be done is driving what's being adopted. And by that, I mean we have people that are very, very steeped, again, in the NIST methodologies in the States. And so, in instances where folks have strong pressure to sell into the US government, people selling into DoD, because they already have obligations to build control frameworks and report against some of the NIST standards, it becomes a really easy bolt on to simply expand the NIST frameworks that you have deployed. What we see internationally, businesses that are working across borders, across really time zones, across the world, the ISO frameworks, because they are internationally recognized, internationally accepted, tend to work really, really well in business. IEEE, we see a lot of push for IEEE, especially now with the AI ethics standards that have rolled through IEEE. I think it's IEEE 7000. But we see a really, really hard push for IEEE standards as it relates to academics and it relates to people that are doing real research around what's important and how we can bring those things that are important from ideation to practical implementation. The EU AI Act it is what it is, Rupa. I mean, I think we all kind of track the evolution of enforcement, the evolution of guidance, the evolution of, or rather the lack of evolution of a defined conformity standard for the QMS. So the EU AI Act, though incredibly valuable in concept, has yet to really show itself to be valuable in practicality. That may be the best way to say this. But what I do think is incredible about the AI Act, however, is that based on the goals, the virtues of what the EU is trying to create with the standard, they're spot on. They align almost directly with OECD's principles of, hey, regardless of what you're doing with AI, we have to ensure that we protect democracy, rule of law, fundamental human rights. Those things are baked directly into the expectations of the EU AI Act. And so I do see at some point it being a more global driver, just as everyone's envisioned. The reality is it's just not there yet today.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and also, Patrick, all of these serves a purpose. Each serves a purpose, and their reach and influence differ depending on the geography, industry, and maturity. For example,
Yes.
UAI Act is more of a regulatory pressure. ISO as global recognition and certifiability, and NIST is practical usability and adaptability, and IEEE is ethical alignment and thought leadership. So, um,
That's it, Rupa. Yes, yes, ma'am. I think we see it exactly the same way.
right.
Yes.
So, Patrick, like ISO is international by nature. So, how does this help companies operating in multiple jurisdictions with varying AI laws?
Oh my goodness, Rupa. And this question is incredible because it gets to the heart of why I am so passionate about management systems. And the short answer is ISO management systems, frankly, do not care where your organization operates. They don't care what laws apply to your organization. They care that you have an understanding of the scope of your environment and the context in which you operate. And so, what we'll see through the structure of the clauses of every ISO management system, clause 4, perhaps the most important clause, at least in my mind, says that we have to have solid scoping. We have to kind of know the boundaries of this system or systems, the people, the processes, the technologies, the locations that drive the value that we're producing with our system. And then we have to understand context. Context being defined as a full listing of our internal and external stakeholders and the pressures driving those stakeholders. As we think about our external stakeholders, that includes external contractual obligations and external regulations. And so, without ever having to say, from an ISO perspective, you must do this, ISO says you need to know who you are and the role you play in the world. Hard stop. That is the most important thing that you can do. And as organizations take that seriously and actually build out an understanding, an articulate understanding of their context, Rupa, necessarily they bring to bear a recognition that external regulation applies here. These are the controls that we'll employ to ensure that we're mitigating risk. All those things that become critically important cascade off that critical initial decision.
Amazing. Thank you,
Yes.
Patrick. Um, and so, another question I have for you is with each region developing its own governance frameworks, how do ISO standards help create a common global language for AI safety?
Oh, goodness. And less safety than responsibility. And I do think of safety as being under the umbrella of responsibility. But again, what ISO does, what the ISO management systems do, is they say, regardless of where you are, know what's important to you. And so, in doing so, it makes it really, really easy to discuss responsibilities cross contextually as organizations understand that it doesn't matter if I'm in healthcare in the United States or if I'm a service provider in the UK. ISO tells me I need to know what responsibilities are mine and I need to know what I'm doing to prepare my people to be successful in addressing those responsibilities. And in that, Rupa, is a common language, a common understanding that regardless of the regulation that is weighing down on an entity, on an organization, it's simply context. It's context and accountability to an external pressure. In addition to that, ISO does, at least in my opinion, an incredible job. The subcommittee that I participate in, SC42, we're currently represented by 70 nations around the world. So we have delegate representation of 70 nations around the world, and we're constantly working together to ensure that we do have consistent language and consistent vocabulary, as well as standards that can be employed, that can actually be used by entities anywhere in the world. And so I do believe the focus and what we're producing as a group is something that's applicable regardless of where someone sits, and frankly, regardless of what someone believes, that the standard is still a standard.
Right. And also,
Yes.
for example, the EU has its AI Act, and the US has NIST, Canada, Singapore, China, India, and all developing their own governance paths. So, for a company
Yes.
working globally, it's like trying to play chess on six different boards at once. So, it's so important
Yes.
to have this common language, a common global language for AI safety, and where ISO really helps build that bridge.
And what I love about this analogy, Rupa, is again thinking back to the management system itself. So in clause 4, that we determine our scoping, we articulate our context. Through that context articulation, we have an opportunity to populate what's called a statement of applicability. That's simply us recognizing and committing on paper to the controls that we'll bring to bear. And so through the management system, as we define our context, we have an opportunity to say through our statement of applicability, we've got these 6 different chessboards that we need to be mindful of. And so we don't necessarily have to take this fractured view and time switch between responsibilities. We can keep all that recorded and visible for everyone in the organization in a single place through the management system itself.
Right.
Yes.
And another question I have for you is, I know it's too many questions.
Oh,
Uh,
please, Rupa. Yeah.
so so can ISO standards be a bridge between global South and global North in ensuring AI is inclusive and context aware?
Rupa, and I think what we're saying now is that play out. As you and I were preparing for this session, we talked about in your book, as you lay out different ethical frameworks, the concept of deontology. So, deontology versus utilitarianism.
Yeah.
Deontology says it's the intent that matters, it's the virtue. The outcomes can be what they are. That doesn't necessarily change the ethical correctness of what it is we're trying to do. Utilitarian says the means don't matter. All we care about are the ends. And so, what I see, at least in the world today, are those two concepts playing out. We see the OECD, we see the EU AI Act as a clean example of this, espousing virtues, espousing the right things to do, but offering zero mechanism whatsoever to practically implement the tools that need to be implemented so that humans can actually get to these ideals. The flip side of that, we see ISO 42001, we see the NIST frameworks, the various frameworks that NIST offers. And these frameworks are all about the outcomes. This is where we need to get. This is who you are. Let's document this. What are we doing to get to the stated goal, the alignment to your business's mission, vision, and values? And so what I see is slowly over time, as people are willing to maybe unfreeze their thinking a little bit, unfreeze their hearts a little bit, and actually see things from another perspective, I do see more and more OECD looking at ISO 42001. I see more and more, though it's very, very guarded, people that are actively producing ISO 42001, but not yet to recognize it as what is it they call it? A harmonized standard. Not yet ready to recognize 42001 as a harmonized standard in the EU. We see these things slowly coming together, wherein we can have stated virtues that benefit humanity. These are the goals, as well as processes, frameworks, and mechanics that allow us to create the outcomes that we want. And so as I think about what's happening in the world today, Rupa, I mean, you know this better than I. There's a very stark, there's high contrast in the power imbalances of nations that have and are developing AI versus that do not have and are not developing AI.
Yeah.
And more, while we allow ourselves to operate in this gray area where we can't stand on a hill and say, this is what's right, this is how we do it, we see that gap growing. And it's going to be a very, very difficult gap to bridge unless we take action soon and unless we do what we know that we need to do. And again, I do believe that implementation of ISO management systems, in this case 42001, allow us to begin taking steps in the right direction. I do.
Right. And I just love the way, you have approached this question so holistically, talking from deontology, utilitarianism, and, the bridging the digital divide and all that. I think it's such an insightful conversation. And I'm sure everybody has so much of learning and insights from this conversation.
Rupa, it's you that's given me this perspective. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing your vision.
Thank you, Patrick. And now I have a last question for you. So, how
Yes.
can ISO 42001 help organizations manage risk throughout the AI lifecycle from design to decommissioning?
Oh, and goodness. And Rupa, that is exactly what 42001 is intended to do. And so what we'll see, I talked a little bit about the clauses, the management commitments, the shalls of the standard itself. And so there are 10 clauses. 4 through 10 become the clauses that are of import. Clauses 1 through 3 are housekeeping, vocabulary, things that don't necessarily factor into building out the management system. It's context, if you will. Clause 4 is about context of the organization. So this is where we scope, this is where we really define our place in the ecosystem and how what we do affects, again, internal and external stakeholders. Clause 5 is leadership. And in that, what we see is through Clause 5, we'll see our leadership, our management body, the people that can actually affect a change in the organization, making hard and fast commitments to the implementation and ongoing continuous improvement of the management system itself. Now, keep in mind, Rupa, I did not say this, but to say this for clarity, all the processes of 42001 are centered around the AI lifecycle for those that develop or use AI. So as we think about context, it's context of our AI system or systems in the greater community. As we think about leadership, it's leadership's commitment to ensuring that we can actually bring to bear and keep running and improving a system that allows us to ensure that we're doing the right things as we develop and use AI. Clauses 6 and 7 are planning and support. So it's at this stage that as an organization, again, based on our unique context, we have an opportunity to plan through certain processes and certain additional requirements that are necessary to ensure that we are developing responsibly. Two biggies are AI risk and AI impact assessment processes. It's through clause 6 that management, through their commitment, say, yes, we will know exactly how we're going to think about AI risk and what risk we bring to bear. We'll know exactly how we're going to think about AI impacts and what we should do should a negative impact befall our stakeholders. What happens if? Clause 7, management actually commits to ensuring that resources are available to continue to run the AIMS. And so, what we see with a lot of initiatives and lots of organizations, and I'm sure you've seen this, Rupa, management says, hey, we must do this. Mid-level management says, okay, but I don't have a budget, I'll try. An initiative gets kicked off, but because there's no real leadership commitment, things die. We see very, very valuable ideas, very, very valuable initiatives die on the vine because they weren't well funded, they weren't well supported, they aren't contextualized in the overall strategy of the organization. Clause 7 of ISO 42001 says, no, we need to address all this. We need to have consistent thinking, consistent planning, and a documented strategy to ensure that we continue driving forward. In Clause 8, we operationalize the management system. And then I think, aside from Clause 4, setting the context, Clauses 9 and 10, which are measurement, how do we measure? How are we sure that we're doing what we said we would do? And Clause 10, continuous improvement. These become really the links in the chain that help us build the Deming loop: plan, do, check, act. And so it's this iterative cycle that we drive over and over and over again to ensure, to your question, that we're considering risk, we're mitigating risk, we're doing everything that we can to think about risk as it relates to AI development through the entire AI lifecycle. We're constantly in the process of planning, doing, checking, acting on a regular basis to ensure that each step along the way, whether we're talking about development, deployment, it doesn't matter. No matter what stage we are of the AI lifecycle, we have an opportunity to apply this very strategic, this very practical way of thinking to ensure that we're actually creating the outcomes that we intend to create at an optimized risk and an optimized cost.
Wow, that was
Yeah,
like very comprehensive, and I'm blown away by your explanation on this question, and I'm sure everybody would have got so much of learning from these conversations and answering all the questions for the podcast. And thank you so much, Patrick. It has been great conversation with you, and uh, I think it's a great contribution to the AI ethics community, the work that you're doing and the knowledge that you have been sharing. I'm so honored to have you as a guest for the podcast.
Rupa, again, the honor is all mine. Thank you. And thank you for what you've done, not only for me, but everyone in our community. Your impact is amazing, and I hope you recognize it.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Thanks a lot.